What is up, guys? It's Mason once again, and welcome to another analysis video. This video is a little bit overdue, not a little bit, quite overdue, but better late than never. So we are basically looking at the National Chess Championships, which was played in January, particularly the female section, because of the interesting story in this section. Now, the current female National Chess Champion is Gertrude Banini, and to my knowledge, this is her first official tournament, over the board tournament that she has played. Now, I don't know when she started training. I don't know much about her, but to come in as a rookie and to win it all, I mean, that's crazy, right? So I just thought all right, I think it's cool. Let's check out her games, especially from phase 2. Now, she played so many people to get here. I even saw my coverage in phase 1 of my games. But we're just going to look at her games against the already well-known female chess players in Ghana and how she fared against them. So we're going to look at, I think, 4 games, and it's going to be a great one. So without much ado, let's get straight into it. So our first game is Gertrude versus Christiana Ashley versus Gertrude. And this is how it went. So Gertrude is playing as black here, and Christiana starts with d4. I wonder why my PC always does this, but d4, d5, knight f3, knight f3, bishop to f5, knight c3, e6. A little bit of a sad story here. So you'll notice that in most of Gertrude's games, she plays in a sort of London system structure. Yeah, well, she gave up on the London system. So currently she doesn't play the London system, which is, I mean, it's sad. But the good news is that we'll see a lot of London systems here. So you can see she's playing a sort of London system style against what her opponent is doing. So e6, a3, a6, bishop to f4, and then c5. c5 is a very nice idea. I really do like this idea. And again, I spoke to her briefly, and she said she didn't really have an established opening at the time. So she briefly looked at the London. And this idea is very good in playing against the London system. So just a quick thing to look at here. So if your opponent does try to opt in for the London and you are playing as black, the best thing to go for here is c5, because you get to equalize the position very easily, and you can even get a very nice queenside attack. So if you watch my streams, you've watched so many of my videos, you notice that I go for these sort of plans. But the problem with how Gertrude does it here is that your opponent, after takes has the move e5, and this can really cause you a lot of problems, because let's say after e takes, queen takes, king takes, then your opponent has knight to e5. He's going to castle. There's a lot of pressure on your side. White is going to have a very good time here. So the difference mainly has to do with tempo, black being second player, and also the presence of this light squared bishop on the f5 square. Anyway, back into it. After takes, white doesn't see this whole idea and goes for e3, right? Just basically opening up the bishop's file and continuing her development. So we have knight to c6, knight to e6. Let me turn this off. Knight to e6, bishop to d3, bishop to g4, bishop to g4, bishop back, and knight g to e7. Ideally the knight should go to f6, but knight d to e7 is not bad. The main thing it brings to mind is that maybe black is at some moment trying to play maybe a knight captures it, and the knight jumps in here, assuming the knight comes into this square. But more likely you'd like to play the knight here, but I mean all this is fine. h3, bishop goes back, castles kingside, and then b5. Now this move looks aesthetically good, but you don't rush with these pawn moves, right? I mean, the idea could be that she wants to go for a minority attack, but at this point, it doesn't really work. You could work on developing your pieces more before you play in such a style, right? You have to make sure that every piece is active and that your king is safe before you develop any sort of plan. That is the way to do it in chess. Now, for this video, you notice I'm doing a lot of corrections and stuff. Yes, this is her with a little bit of not having so much knowledge in the game, so I'm going to use it as a bit of a way to train us as well, what to look at and what to know. But I'll try and keep this video at least 30 minutes. Okay, so now the knight jumps in. Bishop takes, very good, trading your bad bishop for your opponent's good bishop. Queen takes, knight takes, bishop takes, and I was even expecting the immediate knight coming in here, but of course We get the castles first. Queen comes in, and then the knight jumps into f6, preventing any mating threats. We have bishop back to d4, trying to goad black into trading. I mean, this is also white's good bishop, bad bishop, and this is black's good bishop. So Gertrude wisely decides not to trade, and if anything at all, you trade on my terms, because after bishop takes, rook takes, you are trading basically on my terms. And then white plays this move here, knight to e2. And her point is, Christina's point is, if bishop takes and knight, it's possibly bishop takes, knight takes, is the idea, or bishop takes, pawn takes. But the problem with this whole thing is that your queen side is becoming more and more vulnerable. And even if you were not to even take with the pawn or take with the queen or something, you give your opponent the chance to put pressure on you in the center and start creating problems. Again, the queen side. But Gertrude doesn't see that. A very tricky move she could have. She played in this position, queen to b6, and her point, I think, is that after bishop takes, queen takes, then you put pressure here. But this doesn't work because after c3 you have nothing, and your minority attack does not do anything. So maybe she just missed the position. Not to say she's losing, but maybe the idea she went for is not really as strong. What she could have done is one very tricky move here, bishop to d6, which I really much like, showing a desire to come for the king side, and at the same time opening this up. And if your opponent decides to defend this way, you have e5, and that wins you the game. If your opponent decides to defend this way, you still have e5. So it's a very interesting idea, tricky idea that I could have gone for. But I mean, her move was not bad in any ways. So doubling up the rooks. Okay, after we have h6, knight jumps back, rook comes in, and now you can see she's going for this minority attack on the queen side. Knight jumps into the position, queen comes here, and now this is a little bit slow. It's possible she was afraid of something, but here you can just go b5, b4 and push your plan. But it seems she was scared of something. Queen to c6, rook to e2, knight to f5, and now the other rooks come in. Rook to e8, knight jumps into d3. Again, I don't know why. Maybe the knight wants to jump into this square, or the knight wants to block this square. There was a lot of shuffling here, possibly because they were afraid of something in the position. But I felt throughout the game, white had a very, very easy plan of, let's say, queen coming to f3 and then going in with g4, or even the knight maneuver, queen coming in and then g4. Very straightforward plan for white. Black had a very straightforward plan of b4. But let's see how the game goes. So we have the queen now sneaking into the queen side. Queen finally shuffles to f4, rook to d8, and we still have some shuffling. And then eventually white just gets tired of shuffling and says, you know what, let's just go for a g4. Knight jumps back to d6, g5, h takes g5, queen takes g5. Pressure is coming on. But unfortunately, after all this, black's king is safe. There's no quick and easy plan that you can go for. Sacrificing the rooks don't really work as you would want them to. Black is just safe. White had a very strong idea, and white didn't execute it the right way. White got tired and frustrated of all this maneuvering and decided, okay, let me go for it. Now, g4 is not the bad move, but the excessive let's trade down is what caused the losing position, right? When you are being aggressive, when you are attacking, the best option is not to keep trading pieces, right? So she cleared open the king side, which is what she wanted, but there's no way to attack, which is where the issue comes in. And now that black is safe, what does black do? Black gets the king out of all problems and now goes for the plan b4. That's very nice, right? I would have expected a different way of going about it, but she goes for the more safe play, right? Not risking anything, giving her opponent too much, goes for the safe play, and now that everything is done, she pushes her own idea, which is what chess is all about, right? Of course, it was a dangerous thing to do, but it works. So takes, and again, another thing about safety here, right? If the opponent comes in with rook check, you just block, but she decides to prophylactically block first. which is I mean, okay, that's fine. And after some very interesting maneuvers and moves, very nice move, rook to c8. We get to this position where black is just winning After king to h1, h2, h1, this is just checkmate. Very, very interesting game. I don't want to spend too much time. So we are going straight into the next game, which is Gertrude versus Angela. So let's get straight into it. So d4, Gertrude is playing as white here. We have d4, c5, and already we have to talk about this, right? Already we have to talk about this. This is the Benoni defense, old Benoni defense, as chess.com is telling me here. Straight off the bat, the best move is to go d5, straight off the bat. But let's just look at something here, very nice instructive thing here. Now, as a London system player, I know you're going to play c3, e3. You're going to play any of these moves. So the question is, which one is better? Now, I won't say one is specifically better, but one I prefer is e3. Why do I prefer e3? Now, when you play c3, after pawn takes, you realize that we have a symmetrical sort of pawn structure. 2 on 2, 5 on 5, right? 2 on 2, 5 on 5. This pawn structure is very symmetrical, and it can lead to drawish positions, right? Forget about the pieces for now. Just look at the king and the pawns, right? And if we go e3, after pawn takes, you notice a slight difference, right? It's a 3 on 4 versus a 4 on 3. And the very key difference here is that white can create a pass pawn on the queen side, black can create a pass pawn on the king side. But the thing is that both players usually castle king side. So white's king is on the weak side. Your king would want to be on the weak side so he can support, but black's king is on his strong side. So it's going to be a harder journey for black to get his king all the way over to the queen side and defend that weakness. So already in just this position, you have a very interesting decision to take. And I mean, she chose this move, which I used to pick when I started playing the London system, because I thought symmetry was good, but imbalancing the position is quite nice. We'll speed through this game because of that specific point. So now we develop into this structure, which we know is very boring and leads to nothing. A3, again, as we always see this prophylactic idea. And it's very strange because even during the African games, I realized that she always played very good ideas, very aggressively. But then when it came time to cash in, she just couldn't play precisely. Either she couldn't cash in on the idea, or maybe she didn't know the ideas of the idea, or she wanted to play more defensively, which is good. It's good to cover your bases before you go for anything, but sometimes you realize that your opponent doesn't have much and you have all the cards, right? So knight h5, and then she plays here bishop to g3, which is actually wrong. You help your opponent to equalize. Your opponent has a lot of dark square weaknesses around the king, so your bishop is going to do a very good job of attacking these dark square weaknesses, and by playing this move, you just take away that fear from your opponent. That's the first thing. Second thing is, you could have just played bishop to g5, and you'd be like, why bishop to g5? Well, if your opponent gets greedy in trying to sack your bishop, well, you just create threats, right? Of course, it might not go in this exact same way, but you get to create threats. Your opponent can't play greedy, right? So normally I like to play this to force my opponent to either come back or whatever you call it. But trading of the bishops here is not really the right idea. Bishop to g4, bishop back, bishop takes, and now look at this position, exactly what we're talking about. Now we have a symmetrical position except from this side, and the problem we see here is a light squared bishop versus a dark squared bishop. Bishops of opposite color in a symmetrical game where there's no real advantage for anybody. This is draw territory, right? This is draw territory. Of course, you have to play it right? You have to play it right. B and then b4, we see this exact same thing again. Aesthetically it looks good, but what purpose is it achieving at this point in time? Not really anything. This is not even a minority attack to consider it that way. So the pawn structure doesn't call for such an idea. But funny enough, it always works for her. So let's look at this. So we have rook to c8, rook to c1. Knight tries to reroute itself towards the king side. Again, we see this idea of doubling the rooks. And a very interesting move is coming up. Bishop takes, rook comes in, bishop goes back, and then rook comes into a7. And when I was looking at this game, the instant move that popped into my head was, why not just take here? And the reason I was thinking this was that after pawn takes, queen takes, you just win the knight. I'm sure you can all see my mistake right now. The knight jumps back to block. So then I began to think, what is good about this position? And then it strikes me, because after the knight blocks, rook comes into c7. If the rook trades, your opponent's his 4 pieces all his pieces are locked to the defense of this knight. They can't move anywhere. And you have a free bishop here that can really do whatever it wants. So you can even create a pass pawn here and much more create a queen, and you are just completely winning this position. You paralyze black, because once the king moves, you win your piece back in a dominant position, right? Anything your opponent tries to do in this position is just winning. It's just losing. So that would have been a very nice idea to see, but she didn't see, but she played also a very good move here. She plays knight to b5, and after the trade, this is becoming more and more evident that white is winning. White has control of the only open file, dominant, more pawn, a pawn majority on the queen side as well. So white is just slowly pushing her advantage. And now we get into, again, you see specific themes, right? Maneuvering, right? We get this whole maneuvering thing. And then eventually what happens is her opponents always get tired of maneuvering. I keep looking there thinking my camera is there. Her opponents always get tired of maneuvering and go on the offensive. And that's where it gets their problem. It's the same thing with Christiana. She started pushing, trading, capturing, trying to create problems. And then there was nothing. Similar to this, there's nothing. And now your king has been left vulnerable. The queen is invading and problems are going to be created on your side. Queen to c6. And she's breaking through, right? And queen comes in with check. There's nothing. King just slides away. You have nothing. Bishop to h2. Still nothing. Queen takes with check, king comes in, queen takes again. Of course, you could go for more straightforward plans like rook coming in and all sorts of ideas there. But fine, her way is also fine. Queen comes back again. She could go full offense, but what does she do? She just comes back and goes back for the defensive, which has been her strength and her weakness at the same time. So, bishop back, queen back, and now rook to g1, putting pressure on this weak pawn. She knows what to. She knows where to attack and she knows what to do. Queen to e6, queen comes back again. This whole maneuvering, and then eventually the opponent is just going to get tired and make one mistake, one misstep, and she's going to use that one misstep to its fullest, and that is pretty amazing in my books. Rook comes into h1, rook to d8, targeting the queen. Gertrude, cool and collected, no fear. Rook to h8. There's nothing you can do here. The only move you have in this position is queen takes rook. And then queen to f7, checkmate. Very, very nice game from Gertrude. I just love how she can just pause the game, maneuver, and opponents are just going to lose the cool, go aggressive, and it just backfires on them. That's very mature, right? Very, very mature play style. And I mean, that was cool. I mean, even for an opening, you don't fully understand. And it shows, right? Again, I'm speaking a certain way, but it's obvious that it doesn't really know the multiplicity of or the variations that come with playing this specific opening. So she goes for the exact same idea, the exact same plans every single time, whether it works or it doesn't work, right? But still, she does very well. Let's go on to the next game. Let's now look at the game between Gertrude and Toby Felix. So Toby Felix is the 5-time women's national chess champion. But in this year, 2023, she's been very much off the grid, right? So it's safe to say she hadn't like really been practicing, but it's good to see her playing, and let's see how she does. Okay, so Gertrude here is playing as white, and we have d4, d5, bishop f4, knight f6, e3, bishop f5, knight f3, e6, c3, bishop d6, bishop g3, c6, and you can see both of them do play the London system. And again, you can also see that how will I put it, Toby isn't really playing as she normally does. You can see it's like she's just playing the moves. And the good thing about the London system is, since it's a system opening, you can, in a sense, play it the same way against everything, right? So both of them are playing simple, singular ideas that they are aware of. Again, I'm just guessing this. And at the same time, they're playing simple ideas that they are aware of and not really trying to overpower the other, because there are many different ways to have approached this based on the way their opponent did play. But everything they are doing here is fine. Only issue for white here is that black equalizes so quickly, and that's not really what you want to hope for in such a tournament or in such a game. Knight bd6, queen c7, knight e5, knight e4. A misstep here by white, knight to f3. Better would be to play knight takes e4 so that your bishop survives. And after this trade, we have queen to d2, indicating a desire to castle queenside. Again, the reason why I squinted is because the queen here does nothing. So ideally, you want to either bring the queen here or here. So maybe bishop challenging your opponent's bishop. And if takes, then that's a more active way of doing it, right? Because here it's like you're skipping a tempo, because you could move your queen to a much more active square. Knight to d7, knight takes, queen takes, bishop to d3, bishop takes d3, queen takes d3, queen c7, and then castle. So we see why that queen to d2 move wasn't so necessary at that time. Queen to e7, e4, d takes e4, queen takes e4, castles queenside, and then rook h to e1. Skip a lot of the opening because, I mean, the game is liquidating to a more of like an even and a drawn end game. When we look at this position, what do we see? White has more space compared to black. Black's pawn structure resembles something like a Scandinavian or a Caro-Kann. Black has the bishop versus the knight. And again, this is an open game with play on both sides of the board. So you can consider here black has a sort of like an edge. But I mean, it doesn't really matter so much here. And yeah, if there's any advantage I would say for black is that his 4-on-3 here is probably a little bit easier to play because of the like messed up pawn structure here. But yeah, basic ideas are bringing a knight in, and if you can, I mean, playing c4, d5. I don't think that idea really works in this current situation. But normally with this pawn structure, those are the ideas you think about. Queen to f6, rook e2, king to b8, rook d to e1. Rook h to e1, knight e5, bishop takes e5, queen takes e5, queen takes e5, and a slightly anti-positional move, d takes e5. Why am I saying d takes e5 is anti-positional or anti-positional? When you look at the board, you realize that there are only two semi-open files are the H file and the E file. And semi-open files are files where there's at least one pawn of one of the players on that file. So if black has two pawns, it's still considered semi-open file. And I always consider that the semi-open file, like if it's a semi-open file and you don't have a pawn on it, that file is good for you. So these semi-open files, I believe, are good for black. So black would want to keep these files either semi-open, or black would hope to open these semi-open files in the future. So to play a move like d takes e5, you've literally just closed the center, right? So the point or the reason for you putting your rooks here has not been met. Granted, I like where this pawn is. I'm not fighting that. But again, it goes against what you have set up to do here. And now you have to spend time trying to rearrange your pieces on this side of the board, which is where I feel the problem comes from. So a slightly better idea could have been to play rook takes e5 with the plans of f4, f5. Again, this is a weak point you're targeting. Imagine if pawn takes, you have two pawns, two rooks targeting this one pawn. Of course, your opponent can defend, but then he's going to be tied to the defense of that pawn, and you could play other ideas. That is kind of what I mean, it's not bad, it's not losing, but again, we are using these games to learn. D takes e5. Rook to d3, rook to d1, rook e to d8, rook to d2. I like what she did there. Rook takes d2, rook takes d2, rook takes d2, king takes d2. And we have a drawn endgame. Okay, just both players have to play perfectly. But if anything, I'll say white has a slight chance. We have g4, b5, b4, c5, king to d3. c4 is good, taking stake inside your opponent's position, but the problem with this move is that now you've pretty much locked the king side and there's nothing going on here for both players at this point in time. King to e4, king to c6, and then f4. So here the position is basically just like drawn. The position is just drawn. Black can just sit and wait. It looks like white has something, but black can just sit and wait. If any problem arises on the king side, black can just go back and defend. We have f6, f5, pawn takes, king takes, pawn takes, king takes, and now we have king to f6. G5, king g6, king d5, king takes h6, king e4, king takes g5, king d3, king h5, king takes c3, g5, king b2. Again, we're just going straight to the moves. King g6, c3, G7, C2, G8 queen, G8 queen, C1 queen, queen B3, king A1, G4, and Toby plays queen to B2. That just loses the game that just loses the game instantly, because after you trade, this pawn is just promoting freely. And that was very strange, right? You could just go queen check and like try from that point. Again, white still has an edge in this position. So you could have done that, but she didn't go for it. Another reason why this is also good for white is because this king is very much stuck where he is, and it's going to be very difficult for him to try and support the pushing of these pawns. And so white has a slight edge here. It could still be a draw here. These queen endgames are very tricky. It could still be a draw here, but I mean, you still have to play very well. So where did Toby err exactly? Because this game was pretty even, and what made Toby lose would shock you and would not shock you. Like, it would shock you why, but it would not shock you what the move was, right? So in this position, after pawn push, Toby plays the move king to B2, king to B2, which is actually the mistake. You should actually play the move king to king takes B4. Why king takes B4? First off, your king is not stuck here at the back. Second off, after you do promote, again, your king is doing very well. These pawns serve as blockades for the king. But yes, this is not the interesting point I want to make. After the same move G4, queen check, 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 it's this square. That is the point. Because when the bishop is here, there's no real square the bishop can go to actively keep checking the king, right? You check here, I block. You check here, I block. You come in this way, I can win your queen, and you can't come in here as well. So all the checks are blocked except this c5 square. But on the line that Toby went for, what is this slight nuance? Is that if we go for these exact same checks, which would lead to a draw, what do we realize? In this position where we said all these checks are bad, the only check that we needed was queen to c5. But it doesn't exist anymore. And white can simply use this kind of idea to just keep cycling. And because this king can also not join in the defense or in any support in any kind of way, this becomes very easy. This pawn will eventually promote, and white is going to have it. White is going to be very fine in this endgame. Kind of crazy, right? It's so obvious to say, oh, of course, she didn't take the pawn. But why that pawn was so needed blows my mind. Now we get into the final game. Now, the previous opponents of Gertrude, though yes, they are strong and they are the notable names in Ghana, have not been actively playing as I have known them to play, right? The past year, 2023, they weren't like so active, at least as I can remember. But Mod has been training, right? Mod has been training. So like the final boss is Mod. I remember I said that if Gertrude can beat Toby, I didn't really worry about her beating Christiana or Angela based on how the games were going. But I said if Gertrude can defeat Toby, then it's either she wins or she gets second place. That's kind of like where my mind was at. So let's see how this game went. We have Gertrude again playing as white and Mod playing as black. D4, D5, bishop to F4. These are the last times you ever see her play the London system, and this might be the only London system games you see in these types of tournaments, except when I'm playing. But let's enjoy these few moments of London system games. Bishop to F4, knight to F3. Knight to F6, E3, E6. And normally here, I just simply jump in here to try and jump in here. There are very interesting reasons why you want to do that. Bishop to D3, bishop to E7. This makes me smile. C3, castles kingside, knight to D2, knight B to D7, knight G to F3, B6, and queen to C2. Queen to C2 is not bad. Again, it's slow. You want to, for example, just castle, bring your rook to E1, and I've mentioned it quite a number of times on stream that the most common idea here is to play E4, E5. Not to say queen C2 is losing, queen C2 is extremely bad. but I mean, it follows a similar idea of going towards the king side. But I mean, mostly because of how I've played the landing system and the way I've played it throughout the years, it hasn't really benefited me. Not to say it's bad, but it hasn't really benefited me. So I always see it as an inaccuracy. But I mean, there are ideas associated with such a move. Queen c2, c5. c5 is not a problem. Again, one of the moves you don't want to usually play as black is to play c4. Why? You clarify the position. Keeping the pawn tension makes it difficult for your opponent to know what to do or to guess what to do. And you can break open the position, or you can choose to go for the queen side attack based on how the game switches. And if your opponent that is not fully aware of what's happening on the board positionally, you can crush them. Knight to e5, bishop to b7, knight d to f3, c4. And this is actually good for black, right? This is actually good for black. The position is okay for black here. And now this lock position doesn't really favor white, right? This aggressive ideas have been like reduced. And black can actually go for this idea without so much of a problem. Anyways, bishop to e2, b5, knight takes d7, knight takes d7, a3, a5, castles kingside, b4. These very beautiful ideas. Pawn takes, and here you can just play like rook takes a8, rook takes a8, knight to e5, like very simple plans. If you still want to go for it, maybe after knight to e5, maybe you get a bishop here, rook to e1, e5. I mean, very normal plans. This might even fizzle out into an even end game. If you still want to try and force things out, h4, h5, you can consider it, except not here. But Gertrude takes the pawn. And it does two things, right? It first of all, it splits your pawn structure. It gives you this bad isolated pawn. And second of all, she plays this move b3 and gives black a pass pawn. And this might be a big problem, right? At this point, it's not really a big deal, but to allow something of this sort is where the problem is. It could be that she thought that maybe after knight here, if takes, again, this, after going through it too much, might be bad. Because, I mean, if you go bishop here, you just get hit with this, right? So I don't know exactly what she was thinking would happen after b3, that she thought maybe her opponent would have to take. But after c3, black is looking okay. Black is looking okay. And it's not so easy to win this pawn back. So it just brings into question the how good the, taking the pawn was. But anyways, we have rook to a4, queen to b6, rook f to a1, rook takes a4, rook takes a4, rook a8, trades off, and now we have knight to e5. I mean, trying to activate the pieces, which is always what you want to do. But you don't really, it's not really clear where I would want to put my pieces as white here, because leaving the back rank with this pawn, like it's not so safe. So the question is, how do you do it? And I mean, trying to force a checkmate here does not really work. Your opponent blocks it. I can't really figure out a way out here. There might be a way, but maybe the way is not to be aggressive. The way is to find a way to deal with this pawn, right? So we have knight to e5. Knight takes. Sorry, knight doesn't take. Knight to f6. Bishop to d3. H6. H3. Knight jumps into e4. Bishop takes, pawn takes, and then knight jumps back. And here I was actually confused a bit. I think what Gertrude was afraid of was that after playing knight here, after playing f3, your opponent gets his knight here. But that is not something to be scared of, right? You can easily destroy your opponent with a move like e4, attacking your opponent, right? e4, if pawn takes, again, this knight is still having problems here, and then you can create an attack, right? That's kind of like the idea that comes to mind. But she doesn't play f3 here. Instead, she takes, and that even makes the position much worse to play, right? Because now you solidified your opponent's strength. Your queen is tied to the back, to the defense of this pawn, and there's nothing you can really do here. Knight to g4, just moving the pieces back and forth, and then eventually we get into this position where Engine says there's a draw here, which is interesting. Actually, I haven't looked this line quite a bit, but maybe it has something to do with, for example, like bringing the queen all the way into the back rank. But anyways, queen c1, c2. Yeah, I'm going to proudly say it, since it's obvious here that I didn't fully analyze these games to the letter. But hey, it's cool. Bite me. Queen a3, bishop to d5, queen to a7, queen takes b3, and Gertrude had a very nice idea here. Her point is, if your opponent thinks that, oh, you know what, let me just play this move to have my bishop defending this square, yeah, you actually just give yourself a lot of trouble. Sorry, it was knight here, targeting this square for checkmate. If bishop blocks, then you go queen here. Once the king comes in this way, you have queen to this square. What was the move here? After this move, I think you have takes, and if king, no, I've messed up somewhere. I have messed up somewhere. Here blocks, check here, king comes in this way, queen comes in here, king comes in this way. I think it's either g4 and then queen takes, and then that's the final position, and you win from that point on. I think that's the case, because regardless of what your opponent tries to, if your opponent tries to create a queen here, it doesn't really matter because you take, and there's nothing more your opponent can do here. So that's what Gertrude was hoping for. In case you guys forgot, she didn't actually get what she wanted. The opponent just played queen takes, and after trying to get this checkmate, it doesn't work. Gertrude sacrifices the queen and then promotes into a new queen, replacing her queen. And yeah, at this point, the game just continues, and eventually Black wins it. So yeah, against Toby and the rest, she did very well. I really loved her maneuvering side, but against Gertrude saw one chink in the armor, went after it, and completely blew her off the board. But all in all, I mean, even that queen idea, trying to attack, trying to go for a counter in case your opponent plays one misstep, it was also a very nice idea. So all in all, I think in 9 rounds she had 8 points. So she only lost to Maud. Meanwhile, Maud had 7.5, right? So she won by 0.5. So going undefeated in 8 games in your first tournament, I mean, that's crazy. That's crazy. So yeah, I know this video has been long overdue, and it took me a while to get to it, but I'm actually happy I finally did get to it. And I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you were inspired by this video. Again, what I do know was that she was trained, I think, again, if I might be wrong on this, she was trained by Daniel Frimpong Smart. So I mean, kudos to him. He did a great job, right? Because she played, I didn't play like this when I was starting in chess, right? And this goes to really emphasize my point on what I think about having a coach. And I think having a coach is very, very important. Having work ethic and everything is good. It can take you very far. But I see that having a coach is very, very, very important. It's one of the things I've noticed in these past few weeks. So again, thank you guys so much for watching. The candidates are going on. I am watching it while recording this video. Thank you guys so much. And I'll see you in the next video, which might be a recap of one of these candidate games. Have a great rest of your day. Peace.